My rich family raised me to look down on the poor, and I grew up facing the consequences. I was born into a world where money wasn't just power. It was vocabulary, identity, and religion. My parents made sure I understood that from the moment I could speak. Every morning, they reminded me who I was. Oralia, you are above them. Don't forget that. Them, the poor, the ordinary, anyone who wasn't us. I grew up believing compassion was weakness and humility was failure. My parents corrected me harshly whenever I slipped, like the day I tried to share my umbrella with a dripping wet gardener. My mother yanked me away, whispering sharply, "Kindness makes you look cheap." I learned quickly. I learned to lift my chin. I learned to avoid eye contact. I learned to silence any emotion that didn't benefit our image. People admired us from a distance, but up close, our world smelled like control, manipulation, and perfectly polished cruelty. I didn't realize then that the very lessons they drilled into me would become the chains that destroyed my life. By 18, I had every privilege imaginable except freedom. My life was a schedule of expectations, etiquette classes, charity dinners, hollow conversations. But in quiet moments, cracks appeared. The mask I wore felt tighter each day. It happened first when a maid returned my bracelet. Her smile was soft, sincere, and I, trained reflex, stepped back like she was beneath me. The disappointment in her eyes cut deeper than I expected. Then I overheard staff whispering, "She's beautiful but empty, like a doll." Their words dug into me, because deep down I feared they were right. I wasn't living, just performing, and the show was killing whatever humanity was left inside me. But my parents didn't notice or care. All they saw was their perfectly sculpted daughter, a tool, a trophy, a weapon of social dominance. And they didn't realize the more they controlled me, the closer I came to breaking. My awakening began with humiliation, sharp, unexpected, unforgettable. My parents hosted a lavish dinner, inviting influential families, everyone dressed in shimmering arrogance. A young server accidentally spilled wine on my gown. Before I could react, my father slammed his hand on the table. His voice boomed, "Do you know how much this dress costs? Apologize properly." The server trembled, already apologizing, already terrified. But that wasn't enough for my father. He forced the boy to kneel, in front of everyone. My mother whispered to me, "Don't look weak, you should be offended." But as I stared into the server, frightened eyes, something inside me twisted violently, shame, guilt, recognition. Was this who I really was? A product of cruelty, a reflection of their arrogance? I excused myself, locking myself in the bathroom. For the first time in years, I cried. Not for the ruined dress, not for the embarrassment, but because I finally realized the truth. My parents hadn't raised me to be successful. They had raised me to be heartless. When I left for university, I expected admiration, attention, and automatic superiority. Instead, I met reality. My first roommate, Myra, came from a modest background. She was kind, warm, unfiltered, and she treated me like a person, not a princess. At first, I hated it. Her laughter, her messy honesty, her ability to express emotions freely. Everything she embodied clashed with everything I was taught. But the world outside my parents' mansion was different. People valued authenticity over status. They valued character over wealth. Slowly, painfully, I realized how socially crippled I was. I didn't know how to comfort someone. I didn't know how to make friends without flashing my privilege. I didn't know how to apologize sincerely. Myra didn't try to change me, but she held up a mirror, and I didn't like the reflection staring back. It was the beginning of my internal war, who I was raised to be versus who I wanted to become. Just when I thought I could breathe, my parents tightened their grip again. They called daily, not to ask how I felt, but to ask whom I sat with, what I wore, how others perceived me. My father reminded me, "Your reputation is our investment." My mother added, "Choose friends who elevate you, not drag you down." When they learned I'd befriended Myra, everything changed. That girl will contaminate your image, my mother warned coldly. They demanded I cut her off, block her, replace her with someone appropriate. But Myra had seen me cry, laugh, stumble, things my parents never allowed. For the first time in my life, I rebelled. I didn't answer their calls. I didn't follow their orders. That's when the threats began. They froze my bank accounts, restricted my allowance, and sent messages dripping with emotional manipulation. But I still refused. I didn't know it yet, but choosing Myra over them was the first step toward losing everything and finally finding myself. The day my father fully cut me off, he didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply said, "Let's see how long you survive without us." Then the phone went silent, and so did my bank app. I stood frozen in the middle of campus, my heart slamming against my ribs. For the first time in my life, I felt the cold bite of reality. No money, no safety net, no home to run back to. When I told Myra what happened, she didn't hesitate. She grabbed my shaking hands and said, "You're not alone. I've been broke my whole life. We'll figure it out." Her confidence steadied me. Her warmth softened the panic clawing at my chest. But living like her, sharing groceries, budgeting coins, walking to class, was humbling in ways I wasn't ready for. Each day stripped away another layer of my entitlement. Each struggle exposed how unprepared I was to be human. My parents thought this punishment would break me. Instead, it started to rebuild me. It didn't take long for humiliation to find me. It became my harshest, most honest teacher. I worked my first part-time job at a tiny cafe, cleaning tables, wiping spills, taking orders from customers who barely looked at me. The irony burned. I had once looked down on people like this. Now I had become one of them. My first day, a customer snapped his fingers at me. Old me would have snarled inside. But now I stood still, swallowing the bitterness. Later, in the storage room, I cried quietly, not because the job was hard, but because I realized how cruel I used to be. Yet strangely, the humility grounded me. The work made me feel real, useful, alive. One evening, as I mopped the floors, the cafe owner said, "You learn fast. You're not like the typical rich kid." I almost laughed, if only she knew who I used to be. But I was learning. Humility hurts, but it heals. Word got back to my parents that I was working in a cafe. I don't know who told them, but someone did. That's when the humiliation escalated. One afternoon, my mother walked in with two of her wealthy friends, dressed like royalty. Eyes sharp with judgment. She looked at me like I was dirt stuck to her shoe. Her friends whispered loudly, "Is that your daughter? My goodness, how the mighty fall." My mother didn't defend me. She smirked. She enjoyed it. And when I served their table, she leaned forward and whispered, "Leave this pathetic life and come home. Apologize properly, and we'll restore everything." For a moment, I wanted the comfort back, the ease, the power. But then I saw Myra waiting outside, holding my coat, my real friend, my real life. I looked my mother in the eyes and said, "No." Her expression hardened, a warning. I didn't know it then, but my refusal triggered a war I wasn't ready for. My parents didn't yell. They didn't send threats. They destroyed me quietly. Suddenly, false rumors spread around campus, that I stole from classmates, that I was using men for money, that I got fired from 3 jobs. All lies, all planted by someone who knew exactly how to shatter my reputation. Faculty members eyed me with suspicion. Students avoided me. Some whispered as I walked by. My manager pulled me aside one morning. "You're a good worker, but too many complaints have come in. I can't keep you." My heart broke. I knew exactly who was behind this. My parents had once taught me that reputation was everything. Now they weaponized it against me. I walked home in the cold rain, my clothes soaked, my spirit sinking with each step. When I reached our apartment, Myra opened the door before I knocked. Her face softened. "You look destroyed." I broke down in her arms. My parents weren't punishing me anymore. They were erasing me. With no job, no money, and a ruined reputation, I hit rock bottom. But rock bottom is strangely honest. Nothing to hide behind, nothing left to pretend. I started selling my designer clothes online. Each piece felt like shedding another lie I grew up wearing. Myra helped me apply for new jobs. Most rejected me immediately because of the rumors, but she never let me quit. At night, we shared ramen and whispered about our futures, hers filled with hope, mine filled with fear. Still, a small spark inside me refused to die, a stubborn whisper, "You can rebuild." One afternoon, while sorting clothes to sell, I found an old photo, me at 12, chin raised, eyes full of entitlement. I stared at that girl for a long time. I almost hated her, but I also pitied her. She didn't know love or empathy or purpose. I'm not her anymore. I'm becoming someone new, someone real, someone broken but free. Months of struggle had hardened me. I wasn't the pampered girl who laughed at the poor anymore. I was someone quieter, sharper, smarter. I realized something terrifying about my parents. They thrived on control. Humiliation was their weapon, and they believed I would always bow. But I wouldn't. I began quietly documenting everything. Every call, every snide comment, every scheme they whispered to ruin me. I collected emails, text messages, and even recordings of their friends laughing at my failures. At night, I studied their patterns. When they came to check in on me, what did they really want to guilt me, to humiliate me? I started seeing the gaps in their armor, the arrogance, the blind spots, the moments when they thought I was too weak to notice. The seed of revenge was planted, and now I only had to let it grow slowly, meticulously, until the moment I struck. Mira became my anchor. Her life had never been easy. She'd grown up scraping by, watching her parents fight, living in tiny apartments with peeling paint. But she thrived, resilient, cunning, unapologetically herself. One night we sat on her rooftop, staring at the city lights. "I can't go back to them," I whispered, voice trembling. "They'll destroy me again." She tilted her head, her eyes sharp. "Then don't. But if you want them to regret everything, you need a plan. Not screams, not tears. Strategy." Her words clicked in my head. Yes, strategy. Meticulous, quiet, unstoppable strategy. From that night on, we began tracking my parents' moves. We noticed who they talked to, who they manipulated, and which people in their social circle could be swayed. Every lie they told, every rumor they spread, I documented it. For the first time, the panic in my chest was replaced by something else, focus, and the first glimmer of power. It was slow, painful, and humiliating. I couldn't erase the rumors overnight. I couldn't demand respect. I had to earn it. I started volunteering at a community center, quietly helping kids who reminded me of my younger self. I tutored, organized food drives, and even helped clean the old library. People began to notice. Not everyone, but enough. Neighbors, teachers, and small business owners smiled when they saw me. Some whispered, "She's changed." My parents, of course, heard of it. They scoffed. "Pathetic," my mother said to a friend. "She's still a failure. She'll never rise above her class." I smiled inside. Yes, I was still struggling. Yes, I was rebuilding from nothing. But every small victory, every person who believed in me again, became ammunition. Because one day, when I exposed them, the world would see who had really survived. I wasn't powerless anymore. I was patient, and patience was everything. The first strike wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was invisible, but lethal. I sent an anonymous tip to a local journalist, not about my parents personally, but about their shady business deals. Accounts they thought were private, charity funds diverted, luxuries billed to relatives. They were sloppy. Within days, a small article ran, nothing big, just a whisper. A footnote in the city section, but the ripple hit my parents hard. My mother called my cousin in panic. My father yelled at their accountant. They didn't know it was me. I watched them flail from a distance. Each mistake they made, each lie they whispered in fear, fed my quiet satisfaction. It was proof. They could be shaken. They were not untouchable. And I realized the most dangerous weapon I had wasn't money. It was patience, precision, and the power of the truth. The game had begun. By now, my parents' control over me had weakened. I still faced whispers and judgment, but I had allies. Mira, a few teachers, and people I helped along the way, my network of quiet support. The isolation that once felt suffocating now felt protective. I could move, plan, and breathe without being constantly surveilled. I wasn't free, but I was stronger. Every small insult they threw at me, every casual remark about my failure, was stored, documented, and filed in my mind. Even when they appeared generous in public, I saw the strings. I knew the patterns. I began practicing patience like a weapon. Every conversation, every gesture, every meeting, they were all fodder for the moment I would expose the truth. And I knew this. When the time came, the fall would be spectacular. My parents, the people who raised me to look down on the poor, would finally see me as I truly was, powerful, unstoppable, undeniably real. I never expected help from the inside. My parents' social circle was filled with people who flattered, feared, or envied them. But one day, I noticed something, a small pattern in their accountant's behavior. He was meticulous, yet nervous. He whispered concerns to colleagues but never dared confront my parents. I approached him cautiously, offering anonymity, a promise that the truth would be revealed safely. He agreed. Together, we began mapping every hidden account, every off-the-books expense, every manipulated charity donation. What they believed was a perfectly controlled empire was actually full of cracks. Every late-night meeting, every secret ledger, every whispered excuse became part of my arsenal. I realized then that revenge wasn't just personal, it could be systemic. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. I had the truth, allies I could trust, and a plan forming in the shadows. The countdown had begun. It was a Friday evening, the night they loved most. A formal gathering filled with laughter, wine, and applause, the perfect stage for control. I attended quietly, outwardly subdued, polite, and obedient. Inside, my mind raced. I watched every glance, every whisper. My parents were so confident, so unaware of the storm forming around them. I smiled softly at their friends, nodded at their jokes, all while keeping my camera ready, discreetly capturing their lies and slights. The guests laughed at stories I knew were twisted versions of reality. They complimented my parents on their generosity, never noticing the subtle manipulations behind the smiles. I waited, letting the evening unfold naturally, recording everything. Every lie, every boast, every attempt to humiliate me was stored, building a case I would unleash at the perfect moment. The trap was set, and I was patient. I discovered they weren't just cruel, they were organized. Every insult, every rumor, every attempt to shame me had a carefully orchestrated network. Friends, relatives, neighbors, they all played a part, whether willingly or unknowingly. I had to dismantle it. Myra helped me track each whisper, each misrepresentation, each manipulated story. I documented names, dates, and the lies themselves. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deeply they had underestimated me. I reached out to a few unsuspecting allies, people they'd manipulated, misled, or ignored. Slowly, I formed a counter-network, people who wanted the truth but were too afraid to speak. Every conversation became intelligence, every note became proof, and every silent moment in their shadow strengthened my resolve. I was no longer a pawn in their game. I was the strategist, and the first domino was ready to fall. The first public sign of my power came unexpectedly. A charity gala they boasted about, one that claimed to benefit underprivileged children. I attended, quietly observing. They were smug, radiant, untouchable in the eyes of the guests. But I had the documents, the financial records, the expense reports, the whispers from their own staff. I had everything. During a quiet intermission, I shared evidence anonymously with the event coordinator. No accusations, no confrontation, just facts. Within hours, a small article circulated online. Not a scandal yet, just the whisper of impropriety. My parents panicked. Their faces betrayed a flicker of fear, just enough to show me that their armor was cracking. I smiled quietly, sipping my drink. The world hadn't seen it yet, but the first stone had been cast, and the avalanche would follow. Late that night, I walked the city streets alone. The lights glimmered on wet asphalt, reflecting the distance I had traveled, from a girl who looked down on the poor to a woman quietly dismantling her parents' illusions. Memories hit me hard. The cruel lessons, the whispered judgments, the nights I cried silently in my room. I had carried their disdain for years, internalizing it, almost believing it was truth. But tonight, it felt different. Tonight, the power had shifted. I knew their pride, arrogance, and cruelty were vulnerabilities I could exploit. I would not be cruel in haste. I would be precise, patient, and unyielding. I had allies, evidence, and strategy. The world would see them, not as the untouchable elites who mocked me, but as the people who underestimated the girl they tried to break, and I would rise, fully, undeniably, and triumphant. The final week before the reckoning felt electric. Every detail had to be perfect. I reviewed every ledger, every hidden email, every whispered lie. Nothing could be left to chance. Myra and I coordinated our allies, ensuring the evidence reached the right people at the right time. Lawyers, journalists, and former staff, all had copies, carefully anonymized. The narrative would unfold with undeniable clarity. I attended family dinners, charity events, and social gatherings, outwardly composed, smiling, polite. My parents watched, unaware of the storm that had silently gathered around them. They bragged, flaunted, and mocked, believing I was still beneath them. Every lie they had ever told, every subtle humiliation, every attempt to make me feel small, had been catalogued. And now the final pieces were in place. The world would see them as they truly were, and I would no longer be the girl they thought they controlled. It began with a carefully timed email to major journalists. Not a single accusation from me, just the evidence, facts, and records of deceit. By morning, the first headlines hit. Elite family faces scrutiny. Charity funds questioned. Whispers of manipulation and lies surface in socialite circle. I watched from the balcony, heart pounding. My parents panicked, scanning their phones, desperate to control the narrative. It was futile. The truth moved faster than their influence could. Social media exploded with shock, anger, and disbelief. Friends and acquaintances shared posts, screenshots, and stories. No one could silence it. I stayed in the shadows, observing. Their world crumbled quietly but relentlessly. The power they wielded so arrogantly evaporated in hours. For the first time, I felt the full weight of vindication. I was no longer their victim. I was their reckoning. I finally confronted them privately, in their lavish living room. They didn't recognize me, no meek daughter. No obedient pawn, only the woman who had spent years quietly preparing her revenge. "Do you see now?" I asked calmly. The fear in their eyes was intoxicating. Every lie they had told, every lesson of cruelty they tried to instill, it had been their undoing. They stammered, tried to justify, deflect, charm, but I didn't waver. I let them feel every ounce of their arrogance crumble. "I gave you everything you wanted, a compliant daughter, a reflection of your pride," I continued. "But I also learned, observed, and waited, and now the world knows the truth you tried to bury." For the first time, they were powerless. I had risen from humiliation, manipulation, and neglect, and I finally felt free. The aftermath was surreal. Articles, online discussions, and whispers filled every corner of the city. My parents were shamed publicly, their influence diminished. I moved out of their house, taking control of my own life, no longer bound by their expectations, judgments, or twisted teachings. I rebuilt my career, my friendships, and my sense of self-worth. People who had once looked down on me now sought my advice, intrigued by my intelligence and resilience. I smiled quietly, knowing the girl they thought was weak had become untouchable. Every night I reflected on the lessons I had learned. Betrayal, humiliation, and manipulation had forged strength, and with that strength I could protect myself, help others, and live freely. I was no longer defined by their cruelty. I was defined by my choices, my courage, and my unwavering resolve. The final chapter of my old life closed quietly. I walked past my parents' estate one last time, unshaken. No bitterness, only clarity. I had endured ridicule, lies, and betrayal. I had documented every injustice, gathered allies, and ensured the truth emerged. The world had witnessed their arrogance crumble. Now I had everything I ever wanted: independence, dignity, and control. I wasn't seeking revenge anymore. I was savoring justice, the kind that left no room for doubt. I whispered to myself, "They tried to shape me, to break me, to make me small, but I reclaimed my life, my peace, and my power." And for the first time in my life, I felt completely free. I had faced life's consequences, yes, but I had triumphed, and nothing, no betrayal or humiliation could ever take that away.